Okay, it looks like I may have some explaining to do. At the end of my Metroid Prime 2 and 3 reviews, I hinted at the next marathon that I would be covering for this channel, which, as you guys could probably tell, was a new Legend of Zelda marathon. So why am I not doing that instead? 2 words. Arkham Knight. At the time of this video, this game's been out for about 4 weeks, so I figured I should probably talk about a game that's just been released and getting a lot of talk like I did with Hyrule Warriors last year. I will be covering more Zelda games in the marathon after this one, but it does mean the marathon you guys voted for in May of this year will have to be delayed until the marathon after that. So 1,000 apologies for doing so, but I promise that it will be worth the wait. At the moment, it's Batman's turn to shine. Now, there are a lot of Batman games out there, but for this marathon, we're specifically going to focus on the Arkham series, mainly because those are the ones that many people consider to be not only the crowning achievement of Batman games, but superhero games as a whole. Get ready to take control of the Caped Crusader and put on a silly voice. Let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the marathon of the Batman Arkham series. So I'm pretty sure you guys have at least heard of Batman for being one of the most famous superheroes of all time and the main icon for DC Comics, next to Superman. Personally, I'm a bigger Marvel fan than I am a DC fan, but I can appreciate the things that Batman does for his audience. But I'll definitely take Spider-Man over Batman any day. I do very much enjoy the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie though, and the 60s Adam West movie and TV show is something I have a good laugh with. The Dark Knight trilogy is good stuff too. Well, Dark Knight Rises is kinda meh, but The Dark Knight is one I'll happily pop in my free time. Believe it or not, to this day I haven't watched a single episode of the animated series, despite looking like my cup of tea. Netflix, sort it out. But anyway, I'm not gonna bore you guys with my thoughts on Batman himself, so moving on from that, like most superheroes, The Dark Knight, while he did have a few decent games beforehand, generally does not have a good reputation of being in high quality games, despite having a large library of them. Enter Rocksteady Studios, who in conjunction with Warner Brothers gave a brand new feel to Batman games called Batman Arkham Asylum, released in 2009 for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. The Wii owners were pretty much screwed over, but I guess that's for the best. The only other game Rocksteady created before Arkham Asylum was a 2006 PS2 and Xbox first-person shooter called Urban Chaos. So that's pretty ballsy of them to move straight onto a Batman game and potentially please or piss off fans. The story of this game is written by Paul Dini, who's well known for also writing the Batman animated series, the Superman animated series, Tiny Toons Adventures, and the Star Wars Ewoks cartoon show. Already, the great thing about Arkham Asylum is that you don't need to read, watch, or look up any sort of material to understand what's going on in the story. Batman has captured the Joker once again and takes him to Arkham Asylum, which keeps hold of Gotham City's most insane criminals. Normally, thugs like the Joker would be taken to Blackgate Prison, but as for this game, it's been set ablaze, so all of Batman's villains and their henchmen had to be temporarily taken to Arkham Asylum. Batman tells Commissioner Gordon that he smells trouble as the Joker gave in without a fight and decides to escort the asylum guards to his cell. But immediately after Batman is halted from going any further, the Joker attacks the guards that were with him and bypasses security thanks to his girlfriend, Harley Quinn. With the two of them together, they also managed to release other familiar villains like Zsasz, Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, and the Scarecrow. It's your job to travel all across Arkham Island and stop whatever these villains have up their sleeves, leading up to the final encounter with the Joker. Batman Arkham Asylum is kind of a mix between an exploration game and a third-person beat-em-up. You need to investigate Arkham Island and its plentiful buildings and put an end to whatever comes in your way, which are mainly the Joker's armed and unarmed goons, crazy lunatics that like to jump on you, and Poison Ivy's plants that spit out deadly spores. Batman only has one button to punch, but you can press another button to counterattack when you see flashing lines above an enemy's head, kinda like how the Spider Sense works in the Spider-Man 2 game. Batman can also stun enemies, but as for this game, it's not very useful since its only real purpose is to lower the defenses of enemies with knives. And while Batman doesn't have a block button of any kind, he's still able to hop over enemies and leap out of danger whenever he needs to, which is going to be required when facing against enemies wielding stun sticks. The Caped Crusader controls surprisingly well for the most part, but I'm not exactly sure why we need to hold down a button in order to run. You'd think all game developers would master the art of lightly tilting the left stick to walk and pushing it to run, but it seems that's not the case with everybody. And unfortunately, that mechanic is plastered throughout the entire series. The platforming in this game can also be a bit hard to manage. To get Batman to jump, you have to hold the run button and go over the edge a la Legend of Zelda, but it becomes problematic when you're in tight spaces, particularly in the second half of the game. To make things a little easier though, you can use Batman's grappling hook to soar yourself onto a platform or an object like a conveniently placed gargoyle. There are a couple of rooms where the grappling hook won't cling onto anything, however, which is where the platforming's at its worst, in addition to the small spaces I mentioned earlier. You can also glide yourself with Batman's cape to slowly descend on the ground and cross any gaps, as well as making you move a bit faster. And even though the cape gets torn later in the game, you can still glide very smoothly, something that will never make sense in these games. Punching and countering isn't all Batman's capable of doing, however. He can also use various gadgets to help him knock down foes, such as the explosive gel you find in the Batmobile, which basically acts like a detonator and can be hilarious to use, especially since it doesn't actually kill anybody. The Bat Claw, allowing you to pull thugs and objects towards you, and eventually you get the Ultra Bat Claw, which lets you take down walls. The Line Launcher, riding you across gaps that the cape couldn't do. The Cryptographic Sequencer, giving you access through security gates. And of course the good old-fashioned Batarang that knocks back enemies and breaks switches. In terms of exploration, you'll be using quite a number of these gadgets to locate hidden secrets, but in terms of combat, the Batarang and possibly the explosive gel will most likely be the only things you use, as either gadgets like the remote-controlled and sonic Batarang take too long to recharge, or something like the Line Launcher not proving to be very practical. Stealth is another major factor to the Arkham series, especially when enemies are armed with guns. In these sections, you need to plan ahead and play it smart, otherwise Batman's suit's gonna be filled with a bunch of bullet holes.
That loser didn't stand a chance! I mean, look at me!
Silent takedowns are pretty much a necessity when being stealthy, but it's up to you as to how you want to approach it. For example, you can use explosive gel to blow up a wall and incapacitate a goon. You can perform a ledge takedown, instantly knocking them out. Or you can have Batman do an inverted takedown and tie the thug upside down to a gargoyle. But that's assuming you've unlocked it in the upgrades menu. You see, whenever Batman collects a secret item or defeats enemies, he gets experience points. And when you fill out the meter, he can purchase an upgrade at Wayne Tech that either gives him more health, more combat skills, or make his gadgets more efficient to use. I'm a bit confused as to what the experience points are meant to be in terms of currency, and I'm not sure why he has to earn upgrades from a company he owns, but I suppose that's video game logic for you. You may be wondering why Batman is sometimes seeing enemies as skeletons and his vision is covered in blue. That would be his detective mode, without a doubt the most useful tool in the game. Detective mode allows you to see enemies through walls and floors, lets you know if they're armed or not, points out destructible walls, highlights objects you can interact with, and can scan an object to help you locate somebody, like using their fingerprints or even their freaking breath. Detective mode is absolutely game-breaking. I was using this for about 75% of the game. There have been times where I wanted to sneak without it, but its sheer brokenness is really hard to resist using. It's like using the metal blades in Mega Man 2. Sure, you have the option of not equipping it, but why would you? The biggest challenge of the game, however, is not from taking out goons and villains, but from the Riddler, who's also broken out of his cell. You never do see him face to face, but through Batman's earpiece, the Riddler tasks him to solve all of his riddles and puzzles, including using detective mode to scan the solution to a riddle, shattering numerous Joker teeth, or collecting the many Green Riddler trophies scattered throughout the island. Doing all of this is entirely optional, but failing to do so will cause the Riddler to... well, I don't know exactly. He doesn't threat Gotham or the Dark Knight himself in any way, so in the long run, there's really no point in stopping the Riddler. At the very least, solving them will unlock extra maps for challenge mode, which I'll get to in a bit, as well as character biographies in case you want to update yourself with the Batman mythos. The Riddler will also have you find interview tapes of the villains in this game if you want to know their personalities a little more. There are overall 240 riddles to solve in the game, but the Riddler has very kindly placed a map in each area that reveals their locations, so you don't need to feel overwhelmed with completing them all. I do very much like hearing the Riddler go slowly more insane as you solve more riddles, and his arrest at the end is quite gratifying to me after all the taunting he does.
Tell me, how did you work out where I was? Do you hear me? I, Edward Nigma,
As for the graphics, the character models are all nicely detailed, except for Commissioner Gordon. I mean, what the hell's wrong with him? But the CGI cutscenes are remarkable for a 7th generation game. Sadly, it's not all great though. The animations on the in-game dialogue are extremely stiff and almost have no expressions put into any of them. The mouth movements are a bit distracting too, especially on Batman himself, which is odd because I thought he would have gotten the most attention to it. The game's only nearly 6 years old at this point, but the graphics have certainly aged a bit. I mean, look at Harley Quinn's animation while she's riding up an elevator. The enemies also have some ragdoll physics added to them, which I think is hysterical to see, but I'm sure people might not appreciate it as much. The soundtrack is very atmospheric, which for a Batman game fits very well. I'd preferably like a score that's a little more catchy, but nevertheless, what we have gets the job done. And I know I'm not the only person that envisions the 60s Batman theme while beating up thugs. Speaking of sound though, the voice acting in Arkham Asylum is spectacular, with returning actors from the animated series. Kevin Conroy as Batman, Mark Hamill as the Joker, and Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn. You can tell that Mark Hamill has aged a bit since then, but he still gives it his all here and is certainly the most entertaining performance in the game. The other actors do a pretty good job too. In particular, I like the Scarecrow's voice in this game because I think it can sound legitimately scary at times.
Now madness takes you forever.
The only voice I don't really care for is Poison Ivy's. I don't know, I think she's just trying a little too hard to sound seductive. Almost going the Uma Thurman route from Batman and Robin. But other than that, the voice acting overall is fantastic, and I'll happily get a game over just to hear the villains make fun of you.
Too easy. Played you like a violin and cut your strings. Nighty-night, bats.
I suppose the last bit of gameplay to talk about are the boss fights, but I'll need to go a little more into the story first. After about halfway through the game, the Joker reveals his plan of infecting Gotham with this chemical called Titan, which turns people into violent, muscle-bound beasts. Titan was created by Dr. Penelope Young, who's been experimenting on Bane and injecting the venom drugs inside him that give him his strength. The Joker injects more Titan into Bane, which helps him break free. Now for first-time players, the boss fight against Bane is fairly decent and gets your blood pumping, but not so much when you realize that this premise of a boss fight is going to carry on throughout the rest of the game. 1 or 2 Titan-filled giants charge at you while you throw a batarang at its head and rapidly punch it when they're dizzy. It's literally the exact same boss fight over and over again, and it only gets more and more draining the further you get in the game. You do also get to fight Killer Croc while you're trying to find spores to make an antidote for Titan, but it takes forever because Croc is hiding in the sewer water and you have to travel slowly, otherwise he'll locate you and drag you in. Not to mention that you have to get a lot of spores to make this damn antidote. Poison Ivy's a little more interesting to fight because she uses her Titan-filled plants to try and strangle Batman, but it's still the same process of fighting henchmen until she reveals her weak spot and you have to throw a batarang. Oh good, maybe Harley can put up a good fight. You know, Batman's villains aren't as cool as they've been made out to be in this game. The closest Arkham Asylum gets to a good boss fight are the Scarecrow encounters. This is how you do it. You've got an intense atmosphere that messes with the player's mind, and Scarecrow's size proves to be a major threat, encouraging you to do your best to sneak by and shine the bat signal on him. These sections are hands down the highlight of the game, and it's a shame that the other boss fights couldn't be like this. So that's the gameplay covered, let's move on with the rest of the story. With all of the Asylum's major threats dealt with, Batman heads into the Joker's party, complete with applauding goons, and it seems that he's captured Commissioner Gordon and tries to shoot a dart filled with Titan into him, but Batman gets in the way just in time. At this point, the Joker pretty much gives up and shoots himself with Titan, mutating into a giant on steroids with incredibly long fingernails. He tries to tempt Batman into becoming a Titan himself, but Batman says no to that and injects the antidote into him. However, this does mean we now have to fight Titan Joker with only our tiny little fists. That's okay though, because the, massive air quotes here, final boss is laughably easy. If you just keep running, then the Joker will never hit you, and only after a few swings he decides to send in his goons anyway. It's as if we're not even fighting the Joker at all and he's just there in the background. He seems easily distracted too, as all it takes is just a helicopter for him to turn around and let us backclaw onto his back. And the Joker does this 3 times. I thought this guy was supposed to rival the Dark Knight himself, not just some clown with the mindset of a toddler looking at pretty lights. Well anyway, Batman finally defeats the Joker and all of the Titans are back to normal. including the Clown Prince of Crime himself and the major villains from earlier. Batman overhears a call about Two-Face leading a crime and flies back to Gotham City in the Batwing, ending the game. But in a post-credit scene, we see a crate of Titan floating in the ocean and Killer Croc's hand emerges and grabs it. That's the end of story mode, but if you want more Arkham action, then you have the option to play in challenge mode, consisting of either beating up as many thugs as you can, or being as stealthy and as quick as you can. The Game of the Year edition holds 4 extra maps if even that wasn't enough for you, and PlayStation 3 owners can also download the ability to play as the Joker for free. I don't know why the Xbox 360 and PC versions don't allow this, but the Joker regardless is pretty fun to play as. I think he's a little more agile than Batman, and he's also got his own assortment of gadgets, like his revolver and remote control chattering teeth, which is pretty funny to use. Joker's overall more fun to play with than Batman, I find. I like his use of comedy whenever he performs a special takedown or taunts his opponents. And it also helps that I can actually beat up the GCPD, including Commissioner Gordon himself. It's just a shame that we can only use him in challenge mode. The Game of the Year edition also supports 3D visuals, but I really don't care about that. So that's Batman Arkham Asylum, a game that has shown that with enough care and the right developers handling it, you can make a really good superhero game. Sure, the boss fights are a huge letdown, but it still feels good to kick ass and hunt your prey as if you are the Caped Crusader. You don't need to be a Batman fan to enjoy this game, and if you still haven't played it yet, then what the hell's the matter with you? Go and buy it. It's really cheap now, you won't regret it. Excellent start for Rocksteady's first attempt at a superhero game, not to mention that this is only the second game they've ever created, so there's already a bright future for them and the Arkham series, as well as Batman games in general. Hence why in 2011, we got a sequel to Arkham Asylum called Batman Arkham City. This is just the beginning of the marathon, folks, and I will see you in the next video.